big drafting table. All right. I'm a little different speaker from Rabbi Miller. Rabbi Miller comes from Pentecostal family background, and so he kind of is like a pep rally kind of guy. And I came out of Rabbinic Judaism, so I'm more like the lecturer kind of. But I'm not. I try not to be. I'm not boring. I hope I'm not boring. Boring, let me know. All right. So I want to talk to you today about the two souls and the two inclinations.
Ooh, yes.
Starting Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Let's go to Genesis 2, 7. When Yahweh Elohim formed man out of the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. That word for formed there, if you look in the Hebrew text, I don't know if anybody has the Hebrew text with them, but if you look in the Hebrew text, the word there is yetzer. Yetzer is a word that means formed, but it also means an inclination. It's kind of like this idea of shaping something. And so the shape of something can have inclines to it. So you also have this, the word also means inclination. And it also means free will as a result of, and you'll understand why as we go on here, but there's something really peculiar about the way this word appears here in Genesis 2:7, because the letter Y in English, Yud in Hebrew, appears twice.
Wow.
There's a double Yud. It's a misspelling. It's not spelled with two U's, it's supposed to be spelled with one. A mistake in the Torah? Heaven forbid. Yes. It's not a mistake in the Torah. So the Torah is trying to tell us something. There's a reason that there are two Yuds where there should normally be one. The Talmud has an explanation for this in Tractate Berachot 61a. Rabbi Nachman ben Rabbi Hizda expounded, what is meant by the text, then the Lord God formed Vayetzer, man. The word Vayetzer is written with two Yuds to show that Elohim created two inclinations. One good, the other evil. Now when we say good and evil, these words roughly translate into English good and evil. The word for evil is ra, which just means bad. In fact, a good example of how wide the variety of the meaning is, there's a bit of a joke in Hebrew, if somebody has an evil spirit, the word for spirit is ruach, if they have a ruach ra, an evil spirit, good solution is a breath mint, because it also means bad breath. Ruach also means breath, and ra means bad. So and the word good, tov, it means good. So when we think of evil, it doesn't necessarily mean wicked in the same exact sense that we might think of malice. It's more the sense of selfishness, which we will get into. In Christianity, the baby is a picture of innocence. Okay? In Judaism, the baby is actually a picture of evil. Let me explain why. How can that be? Because a baby is only concerned for itself.
There you go.
It does not have even the capacity to care about others. It's me. I want, without even the capacity to concern itself with what someone else wants. Isn't that evil? You see? Now, we are born with a Yetzer Hara, with the inclination to do evil, with the animal soul. The animal soul wants for me. It wants to survive. It wants to eat. It wants pleasure. Okay? The Yetzer Tov is the other inclination, the good inclination. But that comes later. Okay. In fact, the very next page of Talmud, discussing the same issue, it says, "It has been taught," Rabbi Josie the Galilean says, "the righteous are swayed by their good inclination, as it says, 'My heart is slain within me,' Psalm 109:22. The wicked are swayed by their evil inclination, as it says, 'Transgression speaks to the wicked. Methinks there is no fear of God before his eyes,' Psalm 36:1. Average people are swayed by both inclinations, as it says, 'Because he stands at the right hand of the needy to save him from them that judge his soul,' Psalm 109:31. Rabbah said, people such as we are of the average. Now there's a lot packed into this, okay? You can kind of picture, the little cartoon, you see so frequently with the guy with the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. When I was a teenager, actually, I had a devil on each shoulder, competing with each other. One whispering, "Do this," and the other one, no, I got better idea. "Do this." Okay, so, but that's basically what a very good illustration of the two inclinations. There's a battle going on within us. The evil inclination wants for me. And the Yetzer Tov is concerned with the things of Elohim. Okay? And each of us has this battle going on within us. Now, somebody recently said to me that they were studying under a true tzaddik. Now, if you understand what a true tzaddik is, the idea is absurd. A true tzaddik, so you have three different kinds of people laid out here. There's the tzaddik, that's the righteous man. And then you have the rasha, that's the evil man. And then you have the Beinoni. The Beinoni is the guy that's in between. Beinoni has both of these voices going on, okay? But the thing about the Beinoni is that he's always at least trying to follow the Yetzer Tov. Because whenever he follows the Yetzer Hara, he slides over into the rasha category, the wicked. Okay? So, but the tzaddik is the individual who doesn't even have the Yetzer Hara any longer. He has become so in tune with Elohim over so many years that he's actually attained a point where he's not even tempted by evil to violate Torah. His desires are Elohim's desires. All the time, 100% of the time, it doesn't even occur to him to do the wrong thing. It's not that he considers, it just, for a split second, the thought comes into his head, or he smells the bacon in the next room, and the thought, oh, that smells nice. And then the next thought, I'm not going to eat that. The tzaddik smells bacon in the next room, and to him it would be like somebody saying, "Would you like a spider sandwich?" He's like, ugh. Okay? I'm not a tzaddik. I'm a Beinoni. Okay? I struggle day after day with both voices.
Yeah.
And And perhaps the best kinds of teachers are the Benjamin, because they can identify with you, because they hear both voices, and they deal with the struggle. There's a book called the Tanya, which is the foundational book of the Chabad movement, that was written by the Rebbe Zellman hundreds of years ago. And the whole topic of this lengthy book is the struggle that is taking place. In fact, nice little quotation for summary from the Tanya, chapter 9, says, just as two kings wage war over a town, which each wishes to capture and rule, that is to say, to dominate its inhabitants according to his will, so that they obey him in all that he decrees for them, so do the two souls, the divine and the vitalizing animal soul, wage war against each other over the body and all of its limbs. So we have the animal soul within us, and we have the spark of Elohim within us. And the spark of Elohim and the animal soul are driving us different directions. And they're fighting to get the real you in between to listen to each other. So it's like a little tribunal taking place in your body all the time. Okay? Like three judges trying to decide what to do. Okay? The Yetzer Hara votes to do the selfish thing. The Yetzer Tov votes to do the godly thing. And then you make the decision between the two as to what to do. In fact, the Wisdom of Ben Sirach, chapter 15, verses 14 through 16 in the Apocrypha says, it was he who created man in the beginning, and he left him in the power of his own inclination. And the Hebrew word there is yetzer. If you will, you can keep the commandments, and to act faithfully in a matter of your own choice. He has placed before you fire and water. Stretch out your hand for whichever you wish. Paul talks about this very same point. In fact, sometimes it's hard to tell whether I'm reading Tanya or I'm reading Paul. Paul says, let's start with 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16. Because of this, we are not weary, for even if our outer man is corrupted, yet that which is inside is renewed day by day. Here's the struggle between what Paul calls the outer man, the Yetzer Hara, and the inner man, the Yetzer Tov, to do the right thing. Romans chapter 7, and we're actually going to go there because it's going to actually make a great deal of Romans make sense when we look at this portion of Romans chapter 7 and chapter 8. Starting in verse 14. Verse 14 is the key to understanding Romans 7 and 8. Okay? So, whenever you're reading through Romans 7 and 8, and Galatians 5, that we'll go to in a minute, Romans 7:14 must always be in mind. In other words, don't let this point. For we know that the Torah is of the Spirit, and I am of the flesh, and I am sold to sin. Do you see this? There's this dichotomy that Paul lays out in Romans chapter 7, verse 14, between me and what I want, and what my flesh wants, the animal soul, if you will, the Yetzer Hara, and the Torah, which is of the Spirit, and the Yetzer Tov, the inclination to do good, and the spark of divine within me that wants, okay? So the Torah is of the Spirit, and me and what I want, that's fleshly. Verse 15, for the thing which I perform, I know not, And the thing which I desire, I do not do, but the thing which I hate, that I do. Now, boy, isn't that confusing if you don't get this. What he's saying is there's two different voices. That's why it seems to contradict here. I'm doing this, I want to do that. Why does it not seem to make, it doesn't make sense? Because he's describing two different voices within him. Pushing and pulling different directions. And if I do the thing that I do not desire, I give testimony concerning the Torah that it is good. In other words, if I resist the Yetzer Ra and follow the Yetzer Tov, I am giving testimony to the Torah. Because it's Tov, it's good.
Yes.
Now I am not performing this, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that good does not dwell in me, that is in my flesh. For to desire the good is easy for me, to perform it I am not able. Now, why does he seem to contradict himself here? Because he's giving the other voice. Verse 19, for I do not do the good that I desire, I do to do, but the evil that I do not desire to do, I do it. So sometimes the Yetzer Ra wins and I do the wrong thing. And if the thing that I do not desire I do, I am not doing it, but sin that dwells in me. In other words, it's the animal soul that's doing it. And I find, therefore, a Torah that unites with my mind, which desires to do good, whereas evil is near to me. There's a whole teaching we could do just on this. I find, therefore, a Torah that unites with my mind, which desires to do good, whereas evil is near to me. In other words, you're born with the Yetzer Ra. Okay? The Yetzer Tov enters into you through the Torah. Okay? And this is how it works. We receive the wisdom of the Torah. And when we receive the wisdom of the Torah, it's like a woman being impregnated. We then understand the Torah. And when we understand the Torah, it is like the Torah is gestating within us. And then that leads to a knowledge of the Torah. And this is where the Zohar, for example, gets the idea of father, mother, and son. And the Tanya talks about this concept. This knowledge of Torah within us is what the Zohar calls the Son of Yah. It is the Messiah within us. The Spirit of Messiah within us. Because the Messiah is the Torah, and the Torah is the Messiah. Okay? And this spark of the divine within us, this spark of the Messiah within us, is the Yetzer Tov. It's a second soul within us. We call it the Ruach HaKodesh. Okay? The Holy Spirit. All right, so this then unites with our mind. Remember, I said wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. That's the mind. It unites with our mind, and when it unites with our mind, it becomes a part of us. Okay? So then when it becomes a part of you, it's like programming a computer. You put the software in, and that's what the computer thinks. Okay? So the Torah then becomes, when we receive it as wisdom, and we actually comprehend and understand it, and it becomes knowledge within us, it actually becomes part of our thinking, becomes a part of us.
Yes.
It unites with our mind. And when it unites with our mind, that's the solution to the Yetzer Ra, because that's the Yetzer Tov. And this is what Paul is saying. It's what the Tanya says. So I said, sometimes I don't know whether I'm reading Paul or Tanya. Okay. Then Paul says in verse 23, where was I? Verse 22. For I rejoice in the Torah of Eloah, in the inward Son of Man. Okay? In other words, this is my Yetzer Tov, the good inclination within me. But I see another law. This is very key, verse 23. But I see another law, quote unquote. Another so-called law, you might say, in my members that wars against the Torah of my mind and makes me captive to the law of sin that is in my members. What's he describing? He's describing the Yetzer Hara. He's describing the Yetzer Hara as sort of as another law, as opposed to the Torah. Okay? And I am a miserable son of man. Who will deliver me from this body of death? He's lamenting the fact that nonetheless he still struggles day in and day out with this Yetzer Hara within him. Verse 25, I thank Eloah by the hand of our Adon Yeshua the Messiah. Now therefore in my mind I am a servant of the Torah of Eloah, but in my flesh I am a servant of what he calls the law of sin, which is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. Paul was a Benoni. Yaakov HaTzadik was a Tzadik. That's why Paul wrote most of the New Testament, the so-called New Testament. Okay? Because Paul had a lot more to tell us than Yaakov HaTzadik did. Because Yaakov HaTzadik was way up here. Okay? And Paul was actually somebody you could identify with.
Yes.
He was a Benoni. He was, back to the Talmud passage I was talking about earlier, it was Rabbah that said, people such as we are the average. To explain what the significance of that, Rabbah was one of the greatest rabbis of the time. He was so righteous, if you will, okay, that when it was time for him to die, the angel of death, according to the tradition anyway, the angel of death couldn't take him because he spent all of his spare time studying Torah. And so the angel of death couldn't come near him while he was studying Torah. So finally, the angel of death created a distraction with a little rustling in the bushes, and Rabbah, startled and for a moment, stopped his Torah study and looked up, what's that in the bushes? And the angel of death was able to finally take him. So that's the guy that you're talking, that is saying, people like me are a Benoni. Okay? So when somebody runs to you and says, I'm a tzaddik, or let me bring you to this teacher over here, he's a true tzaddik, be very, very, very careful.
Yes.
Okay? Because that is a very, very rare thing, and even if they were, might not necessarily be the best teacher anyway. Okay. So back to Romans, going into chapter 8 here. Henceforth there is no condemnation to those who in Yeshua the Messiah do not walk in the flesh. Christians love to quote the first half of this verse and stop.
That's true.
Henceforth there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Stop. They don't want to go to the rest of it that says, do not walk in the flesh. Because do not walk in the flesh sends us back up to Romans 7:14.
Yeah.
Where walking in the flesh and walking in the spirit are contrasted. And walking in the flesh is walking according to Torah, and walking in the spirit is walking according to the Torah, and walking according to the flesh is doing my own thing and not walking according to the Torah. So henceforth there is no condemnation for those in Yeshua the Messiah who do not walk in the flesh. For the Torah of the Spirit of life that is in Yeshua the Messiah freed you from the law of sin and of death. Oh, I hear this quoted all the time. Out of context, isolated from what everything else says. The law of sin that is being talked about here, as we saw from the context, isn't the Torah at all. It's the evil inclination. So it says, for the Torah of the Spirit of life that is in Yeshua the Messiah, because the Messiah is the Torah is the Messiah, freed you from the law of sin and of death, from the Yetzer Hara. For because the law was weak through the infirmity of the flesh, and this one gets quoted by itself out of context too. Oh, the law is weak. Because the law was weak through the infirmity of the flesh. Oh, he sent his son in the likeness of the flesh of sin because of sin, that he might condemn sin in his flesh. So the law was weak Messiah had to come in its place, basically. Do away with it. No. That's not what's being said here. The law that's weak through the infirmity of the flesh here is the Yetzer Hara, the law of sin, not the Torah. It all goes back to Romans 7:14. So that the righteousness of the Torah might be fulfilled in us who do not walk by the flesh, but by the Spirit, which verifies that we've been understanding this properly. Takes us basically right back to 7:14, like a bookend, and wraps it all up. For those who are in the flesh think the things of the flesh, and those who are of the Spirit think the things of the Spirit. For the thinking of the flesh is death, but the thinking of the Spirit is life and shalom. Because the thinking of the flesh is at enmity with Eloah. For it is not subject to the Torah of Eloah, because it is impossible. In other words, it's impossible for the Yetzer Hara to follow Elohim. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people who are not believers, who do not have the spark of divine within them, who do things that are good. They do good deeds. But they always do them for selfish reasons, even if they don't realize it's for selfish reasons. Sometimes it's a very, very subtle selfish reason. For example, I remember seeing the person on television one time that was talking about why they had saved Jews during the Holocaust. And one of their comments was that the reason we did this is we saw how the Nazis were treating the Jews, and it offended our sensibilities. See, they weren't doing it for Elohim. They were doing it because they were bothered by what they saw happen. And they wanted to relieve themselves of the burden of that. But they were doing it for themselves. They weren't doing it for Elohim. It was a very, very subtle issue here. But it was still, they were actually doing a good thing, but they were motivated by the Yetzer Hara. They were motivated by a selfish desire. Okay. Now you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If truly the Spirit of Eloah dwells in you, but if a man does not have the Spirit of Messiah in him, this one is not his. Now I want to turn now to Galatians 5:17. Galatians 5:17. Here again, Paul mentions the conflict between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, the evil inclination and the good inclination, the war taking place within us. And he says, for the flesh desires a thing which is opposed to the Spirit, and the Spirit desires a thing that is opposed to the flesh. And the two of these are opposed to each other, that you do not do the thing which you desire. This is so similar to what we read in, or what we see in the Tanya chapter 9, just as two kings wage war over a town, which each wishes to capture and rule, that is to say, to dominate its inhabitants according to his will, so that they obey him in all that he decrees for them. So do the two souls, the divine and the vitalizing animal soul, wage war against each other over the body and all of its limbs. Okay, now, I want to start back up here in this little section of Romans and get some application of this, because it's one thing for us to get the theory of the two souls battling within us, okay, and the two inclinations that Paul talks about. Now, the Torah leads us one way, and our own desires lead us the other way. But I want to bring it home. Let's start with verse 15. Yeah, sure. 15. Let's start verse 14, actually. For all the Torah is fulfilled in one word, that you should love your neighbor like yourself. which is actually quoting the Torah, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. But if you bite and devour one another, beware lest from one another you be consumed. But I say, by the Spirit walk, and the lust of the flesh never follow. How do you walk by the Spirit? Romans 7:14. The Torah is of the Spirit, but I am of the flesh. So we have the same dichotomy here, the Torah and the flesh, the Spirit and the flesh. The Yetzer Ra and the Yetzer Tov. The evil inclination and the good inclination. The animal soul and the divine soul. For the flesh desires a thing which is opposed to the Spirit desires a thing that is opposed to the flesh, and the two of these are opposed to each other, that you do not do the thing which you desire. But if by the Spirit you are led, you are not to keep Nemosa, it says in the Hebrew version, under the law. Now, under the law doesn't literally mean under the law. Let me explain what I mean. There are two phrases Paul uses, works of the law and under the law, that were actually technical theological terms that his opponents used. And so he was using these terms to describe a false theology that was never true, that his opponents held to. It would be as if a Baptist preacher was speaking, and the Baptist preacher began to say that, talking about baptism, and say that, talking about Mormons, say, Latter-day Saints, their baptism will profit them nothing. And if somebody didn't know the cultural historical information that Latter-day Saints were Mormons, and they were just taking him literally word for word, say 5,000 years in the future without any historical context, just isolating his words, they would say, well, what did he have against those that would be saints in the last days? You see. But Latter-day Saints was a technical theological term used by his opponents. That's what it meant. Under the law was a technical theological term used by Paul's opponents. Okay? In fact, I think Romans 6:14 contrasts under the law with under grace. We've always been under grace, right? Could anybody ever earn their salvation?
No.
Then we've always been under grace, right?
Yes.
So under the law isn't an obsolete Old Testament system. It's a false theology that was never true. Okay? Same thing with works of the law. In fact, the term works of the law is shown up in the Dead Sea Scrolls as a technical theological term used by Paul's opponents that were teaching salvation by certain works. Okay. So, that's a whole different teaching. Let's go on. For the works of the flesh are known. Okay, so now Paul's going to give us a list of works of the flesh. And we're going to skip that for a moment and come back to it. And then verse 24, verse 22, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, shalom, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, trust, meekness, patience, against which the Torah does not stand. In other words, all those things are compatible with the Torah. They're the goal of the Torah. That's what the Torah is all about, those things. Therefore, let us live by the Spirit and let us follow the Spirit, which, again, going back to Romans 7:14 means let us follow the Torah. How people read Galatians and come away confused, well, there's a lot of bad commentaries and stuff, for one thing. Therefore, let us live by the Spirit and let us follow the Spirit. Let us not be of empty glory, so that we ridicule one another and envy one another. Now let's go back to the works of the flesh. Paul gives a list of works of the flesh also. And these are works that are motivated by the Yetzer Ra. That is the context here, right? They're works that are motivated by the flesh. They are works that are motivated by selfishness. And they are works that are in rebellion to Torah and rebellion to what Elohim wants us to do, and in rebellion to the spark of Elohim within us. And they are fornication, uncleanness, perversion, worship of idols, magic, animosity, contention, overzealousness, anger, insolence. These next two words I'm going to focus on in a minute. So we're going to skip these next, the last two words of verse 20. Verse 21, envy, murder, drunkenness, and reveling, and all that are similar to these. All right, now let's go back to the last two words. The last two words are, in the Hebraic Roots version, factionalism, and the next word is sectarianism. Now, there's a wide variety of different translations out there with a wide variety of translations for these two words. So let's start with the next to the last word. The next to the last word in verse 20. What do some of you guys have? Sedition. Jealousy. Anybody else have anything different? Okay. That's the next to
Drunkenness.
in verse 20. The next to the last word in verse 20. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sorcery.
That's the next to the last word
Verse 20?
in verse 20. The next to the last word.
Dissension.
Dissension. There you go. Dissension. Okay. Here's let's talk about and then the next. Let's talk about the last word, and then I'll go over each of them. The last word I have in the Hebraic Roots version, sectarianism. What are some other translations that you guys have for the last word in verse 20? I'm sorry? Heresies. Which, by the way, heresies, we use that in English to mean false teaching, but originally the word in Greek for that heresies comes from actually means sectarianism. Anyone have anything else? Division. Okay. These are very similar words. Okay. The first word is heresies. Let's talk about the Greek word heresies. It means party or disunion. The New American Standard and the NIV have factions. The Revised Standard Version has party spirit. The New English Bible has party intrigues. Beck has divisions. Today's English version has they separate into parties and groups. The Complete Jewish Bible has factionalism, and the ISR version has dissensions. The original Aramaic word there is tzedakah, which means split, slit, or rent. The Greek word for the other word is dikastia, which means disunion, dissension, division, sedition. The NIV, the New American Standard, and the Revised Standard Version have dissensions, and the Complete Jewish Bible has intrigue, and ISR has factions. The Aramaic word there is palagota. Palagota means divisions. Well, that's what it means. It just means divisions. Okay? Now, Paul lists this as a work of the flesh, and he puts it in a list with fornication, idol worship, sorcery, and murder. Sectarianism, divisionalism, factionalism, party spirit. Paul writes to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 3 through 4, "For you are in the flesh." Here we are talking about the flesh again. "You are in the flesh, for there are among you envy and contention and factions," and that word factions is the same word, pelagota. "Are you not carnal and walking in the flesh, as opposed to in the spirit?" For when each man of you says, I am of Paul, and another says, I am of Apollos, are you not carnal? Are you not following the Yetzer Ra and not the Yetzer Tov? 2 Kepha chapter 2 verse 1. But there are also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you who will secretly bring in destructive sects. That's same word tzedakah in Aramaic. To bring in, the Greek is heresies again. That word heresies, when we read it, we think, false teaching, which it is, but it's false teaching because it's sectarianism. It's creating a new sect. It's splitting away. Saying, I don't like the way things are around here. I'm going to go start take my toys and go do my own thing. Okay. Romans 16, 17. Let's go there. Romans 16, 17. Now I entreat you, my brothers, that you beware of those who cause divisions. Palogota, again, same word. That cause divisions and scandals outside of the teaching that you have learned, that you keep away from them. For those who are so do not serve our Adon Yeshua the Messiah, but their belly. And with sweet words and blessings, they turn away the hearts of the simple. When Yeshua was on his last day, in his last hours, in the Garden of Gethsemane, what was he praying? What was he thinking? Was he thinking of himself?
Yes, first.
You would think, well, yeah, at first. But then we get this prayer that he gives in John chapter 17, verses 17 through 26. And he was actually thinking about us. He was concerned about us. And you might be surprised what was on his mind. John 17, verses 17 through 26. He gives this prayer. Father, sanctify them by your truth. What is truth?
Torah.
Psalm 119, verse 142, your Torah is truth. Sanctify them by your truth, for your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, also I send them into the world. And for their sakes I sanctify my nephesh, that they also might be sanctified in truth. And I do not ask for the sake of these alone, but also for the sake of those who will have faith in me through their word. So I'm not just talking about my 12 here. I'm talking about those who will come after them and will believe in me because of what they wrote. That all might be one. Verse 21, that all might be one. As you are, my Father, in me and I am in you, that they also might be one in us, that the world might believe that you sent me. The glory that you gave me, I gave to them, that they might be one, even as we are one. So what was foremost on his mind was, that the body of Messiah that would come in the future would be one. Wouldn't have problems with disunity and sectarianism and divisions. I am in them and you are in me, that they be perfected into one, that the world might know that you sent me, and that you might have loved them as you also loved me. Father, I want that those whom you gave me might also be with me wherever I am, so that they might see my glory, which you gave me, because you loved me from before the foundations of the world. My righteous Father, the world has not known you, but I know you, and they know that you sent me. And I have made known to them your name. And I will make known, so that the love which you loved me might be in them, and I might be in them. So what was Messiah's dying wish? That we be one. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 3 through 6. Be diligent to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of shalom, that you be one body and one Spirit, even as you are called in one hope of your calling. For Yahweh is one, and the faith is one, and the immersion is one, and one Eloah is Father of all, and above all, and through all, and in us all. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10. Now I urge you, my brothers, in the name of our Adon Yeshua the Messiah, that you have one word to all, and that there be no factions, palagota, among you, but that you be wholehearted in one purpose and in one mind.
Yeah.
1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 13. Notice we keep seeing this. I had a college teacher once that said, if I say something twice, pay real close attention to not be on the test later. For as the body is one, and there are in it many members, and all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, so also the Messiah. For all of us also are immersed by one Spirit into one body, whether Jew or Aramean, whether slave or son of freedom, and all of us drank of one Spirit. Philippians 3:16. Nevertheless, this that we have attained, let us follow in one path and with one accord. It's not talking about a Honda. 1 John 1:7. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another. So Elohim's desire for us is that we be one, that we be unified. And it is a work of the flesh to bring disunity, to bring division. To go, oh, well, I'm going to go split away and we're going to go start to do something else over here. That's not what Elohim wants. And that is motivated by selfish desires. It is from the Yetzer Hara. And I'm not asking you to believe me. Don't believe a word I have to say. Believe your scriptures. Believe Elohim.
Amen.
So that's all I have to say for today.
Woo, thank you.
Kavod Tov. And thank you for having me here.
Do you have that in print so we can have a copy?
I can get it in print.
Yes.
I will put it together and
That's an awesome study for us here. So, thank you.
You want me to take it?
I'll take it.
I have to.
How many of you,
Sorry.
how many of you were blessed by that? Thank you, that was absolutely wonderful. So he's gonna get us copies of that so then we can take it in turn and study it ourselves. I wanna get that deep within my spirit. I want to be able to live it and I wanna be able to breathe it. Okay, so how many of you are hungry? Okay. let's get ready to go eat. So let's bless the food here. The humble will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek Yahweh will praise him. May your hearts live forever.